came to this country from Jamaica and has been an activist all of his life and has been an artist all of his life. His main media for many years was film and television in Jamaica. And his studies and his whole career were in film and television. And then he came to the United States and he studied at the Art Institute in Fort Lauderdale. And he's been making art all along. His media has changed. It's become much more photo-based in recent years. And he does different kinds of photography, but what I find so fascinating is the ways in which he combines photographs and ideas and words to create something very unique and important. And with that, I give you Louis Davis.
Okay, thank you. Thank everybody for being here. Thank Eddie for inviting me. I really do consider this to be a privilege and an honor to be here. The first thing I would like to do is, as part of my getting my vocal thing settled down, I see a whole bunch of broad people here in West Palm Beach, and what I'd like to do is you guys should just shift yourself. What my thinking is that, I mean, if anything, you can go back and tell people, boy, Louis Davis sucked, but at least I met a new friend today. So, I mean, if we can just mix, I don't mind. If you guys don't mind, just mix a little bit. You know? So we just don't have a group of, because... By the way, there's a reason for this distribution as well. Studies have shown that if you're sitting beside somebody new, you're less likely to get up and lynch the speaker than if you're sitting beside friends. You know? So it's really for my safety as well. Let me also say that if my Irish accent gives you trouble, you can blame Sean Connery for it. Everybody seems to tell me that I look like him. I don't know why. And my name is Louis Davis, but I'm not related to Louis Armstrong or Sammy Davis, so I don't do song and dances. So let me start to kind of do the first piece first and just tell you a little bit about myself, and then we can move on from there. Yes, I'm from Jamaica, and I've been a long-time activist. I have on my website, I think, the first time I smelled tear gas, I was 13 years old. But little did I know that I was an activist long before that. And that comes from my mother to some extent. She was always giving me books, and I was brought up in the 60s and 70s at a time when in the United States you had the Vietnam War, you had the civil rights struggles, you had the Soviet Union, and Jamaica had its own political struggles. So I was always involved in that in one way or the other. Basically, it very much amuses me when I see people talk about President Obama being a raving socialist. And I'm saying, really? Because anywhere else in the world, President Obama is to the right of center. Believe it or not. Every Democrat, most Democrats here are really to the right of center. Because in Jamaica, our most conservative party would be to the left of the Democrats. And they are conservative. So something kind of amused me when we use these political terms and recognize that some of the political terms are regional as against global, because globally it's a totally different thing. So if I really speak what I think, some people would really think that I'm a communist, but I am not. But you know, in the context of America, that might be thought so, but I'm really not. So that is one thing. In Jamaica, the second or third time I smelled tear gas, I was in a riot. I was not participating, I was just documenting it. I was hit by a coconut. It sounds exotic to be hit by a coconut, but the pain is still there. I was a target of policemen who, for some reason, decided that I was standing in the square and that they would use me to aim the tear gas. The second part of that demonstration was I was detained by the police. I was smart enough not to get arrested, but I was actually detained by the police. So I've been through those type of things, and if you're a part of Jamaica, you get caught up in the politics very easily. So I'll tell you about that. The other thing about me is that, I'll just say very briefly, I don't generally, how would I put it? What is an activist? An activist is basically somebody who has some sort of political, social, environmental cause. You have many different types of activists. You have activists who stick to one single issue. You have activists who stick to many different issues for one reason or the other. I don't have a singular issue. I prefer not to, because that is really very consuming, and to me it's very limited. My whole canvas is about anybody who is, anytime there's some form of environmental degradation or anytime there's some form of oppression or exploitation, if I can put that to an image, I will do that. So therefore my work is not really restricted or limited. Sometimes I think in the art world people might say that you shouldn't try to cover too many things. That is not my thing. I do what I feel is I am comfortable. Another thing to say very quickly, one of the things I expect here tonight is that I will be offending somebody. I will probably be offending at some part or the other, offending everybody. And to me that is fine, because if you're an activist, that is part of your job description. You have to put things in front of people that people might not agree with, right? And the truth is, if we end up here leaving and nobody's offended at the end of the presentation, I will be offended. And you don't want me offended, okay? So this is part of a series. I don't know if you can read it properly, but if you do, you might be offended. The other thing that I need here to say is that though I'm Jamaican, I'm not a Jamaican artist. I'm not a black artist. I'm not an African-American artist. I'm not an American artist. I'm simply an artist. My issues are not local or restricted to any one country or one region. My issues are generally international. Wherever you go, you find problems. You find discrimination, whether it is based on sex, sexual orientation, race, money, class, or even environmental problems. I like to address all of those issues because they're international. There are issues in every single country. So therefore, again, I don't restrict myself to being a Jamaican, Caribbean, African-American, American artist. I have no single cause also. That's the other thing. I deal with nationalism, I deal with racism, I don't hug trees daily. Different activists have different egos, different powers, different skills, and they apply to what they do. Keep America white. Okay, if nobody's offended by no, right? This one was something I did in about 2002, 2003, very early. It was an interplay of how in America people use religion to speak against sexual orientation. And very quickly in this, there's a part of the religion there, and this came from an image from the civil rights struggles. I remember an image of this black guy was being attacked by these white guys in the civil rights things, and they're actually using an American flag to hit him and almost impale him. So I sort of replicated that. But then I like to use a lot of religious imagery in my work, so you'll find it cropping up from time to time. I'm not particularly happy with organized religions, because organized religions become a specific tool for specific things. It keeps us in control whether we like it or not. We want to step out, we want to advocate something. If I may go back to my school quickly, very quickly. When I was at school, the Board of Governors kicked out the headmaster. They kicked out the headmaster, and then the head of the Board of Governors was a religious guy. And when he came to the upper school body, he put us in the chapel, and he was trying to tell us why they kicked us out, and we would not buy it. So the guys in the chapel were getting a little unruly at this reverend. And did you know what he did? He just stood up and said, "Let us pray." And everybody did this. And I was the only one sitting and looking at him. And the guy looked at me, and his face said, "You can't beat me. You can't beat me." That's all he did, said, "Well, let us pray." And everybody a conversation just stopped. The guy, the headmaster was kicked out, things remained the same. Really and truly, I could not stop him. So basically, I tend to look at organized religion in that context. I have no problems with people's personal religious belief, but I think that we have to look carefully at how organized religion what kind of tool it is. And sometimes, I think many of us look at it and recognize that sometimes it is opposed to our internal religion and even opposed to our own belief in the Bible. But that organized religion can be a tool of oppression and exploitation. I might say that my images tend to be quite ambiguous. I had this image at the African American Museum some time ago, and the people who were most offended by it were African Americans, because they were offended with the connotation of a black man with a gun. One of the things I'd like to say, if we really want to stop the NRA, sign up a couple of 100,000 black people. Believe you me, all of a sudden gun control becomes an issue, you know? But remember what I said about ambiguity. This work is very ambiguous because everybody focused on that image. And I think a lot of people thought about the Washington sniper, which, I don't know if anybody remember the two snipers, which, by the way, coincidentally are Jamaican, which, by the way, coincidentally today is Jamaica's 51st anniversary, independence anniversary. But this is really not about violence. Freedom is active, not passive. Freedom starts with knowledge. All those messages on the outside actually speaks that we really don't need violence. We really need to educate ourselves. Oh, interesting, the name of this piece is "The Most Feared Man in America is the Black Man Wearing Reading Glasses." Oh. See what I mean? Everybody jumped to the gun. That's not the most feared man in America. The most feared man in America is the one wearing reading glasses, right? And that nobody looked at the glasses, nobody thought about the glasses, but that was the whole point. That was the whole point of that issue. Next, Jerry. As I said, I don't have any one particular issue. I have a whole canvas, a whole set of issues. And so therefore you'll find me doing environmental stuff, every type of stuff. Anything that I can visualize, and I can't visualize everything. There are some issues, for example, where I can only visualize it's like 3 years after. You know, it just happens. And there are some images where I pre-visualize incidents even before they have happened, and you will see that. If you're an activist, there's a whole slate of issues. One of the things I like to say is that all of us here can be activists. There's not a problem with us. All of us have issues. Whether we belong to the Tea Party or belong to the Democrats or the Liberals or so, we have issues. And some of us keep silent about the issues, but there are some issues we speak about. But we all can choose to be an activist. It just depends on how much time we're willing to put in it. Also, there are people who are artists while they're activists in their private life. Basically, that means they have causes, but they don't paint or photograph those causes. Their work draws them to something else. That's fine. Nothing is wrong with that. There are people who do that. You can be a doctor, and then on Saturdays you go out and you protest against something. Well, that's the same thing with a lot of us. I would not say to anybody that you have to be a social conscience artist. You can be an artist who does flowers, but in your life, you're for environmental causes. You can combine the two. I know that there are some people here, Mr. Burks, for example, he has a lot of environmental issues, particularly to do with animals, etc., and he paints them, and he paints them very well. Trinidad also, I've seen some of her work that speaks to some form of activism. Carolyn McFarlane is another activist. She deals mainly with women issues at times. So an activist artist is somebody who simply uses their art talents to expose the cause. My thing is, all I want to do is to change one person. This is more of a graphic piece rather than an art piece. Basically, what it says is a lot of things that people can protest about, right? And we have thousands of them every day opening up. And everywhere in the country, that's there. Okay, my very early images. This was done in Jamaica, about Jamaica. This was done in the 90s for my first exhibition at a place called, it was the best gallery, most well-respected gallery in Kingston, called the Mutual Gallery. And my exhibition, Incongruity or Decomposition, wow, that sounds so nice now, was the first individual color photographic exhibition at the time, and this was in the mid-90s. Because in the 80s and the 90s, particularly the 90s, and even in the United States up to the 60s and 70s, color was not considered a tool for art photography. It was considered too graphic, too colorful. People only spoke about black and white as art. I wanted to challenge that. Every time you offer something and say you shouldn't do that, that's the way I'm going, right? It's automatic. If you said, and people here who know me know that I always move against the grain. Not that I'm always right, but I am moving against the grain because, and guess what? That's very American. One of the things I admire very much about this country, you don't tell an American that you cannot do that. He will invent it, right? Sometimes it's not always the best thing, but if you tell that, well, I was born with that inside me. You say, don't go through that door, I'm walking right through it. You know? So I didn't like the dark room. I didn't like the black and white dark room. I like black and white, but I could not deal with the black and white dark room. And all the black and white people here say, oh, you're right. But I couldn't deal with the claustrophobia, and I couldn't deal with the fumes. So I turned to color. This was part of a series that spoke about Jamaican people and how they saw their flag. And that's the flag of Jamaica. This was also part of that exhibition, and that shows you how far back. And by the way, these two shots are not photoshopped. They are straight photography. This I built in my living room, and it stood in my living room for weeks, really weeks. So, you know, my social life was dead. Right? Next. This is one of my environmental pieces, which basically essentially speaks about the fact that no matter what we do, nature is going to take back over, right? So what you have here is the industrial things and the calories is growing out of them. But this was one of my first pieces when I started photography. It was mutation after the bomb, straight photography. It wasn't cigarette, it was mosquito coils to create that smoke, and I photographed it like that. This was painted on the wall. This was actually painted, really painted, on my living room wall. Not a nude, of course, but the rest was painted. And this was, again, a religious piece, and it was speaking about the Jamaican people and their relationship to religion and how they dealt with it. Jamaica is a strange country. According to them, the United Nations say that Jamaica has more bars and churches per square acre than any other country in the world. Go figure. But right, we do have a lot of churches in Jamaica. And this was my way of dealing with that. By the way, this is a flag here. So it is a little bit underlit because I wanted to use very dramatic lighting. But it didn't have Photoshop or digital, so I couldn't look back at it. It was shot on film, on slides. This now brought in 3 flags. Jamaicans' relationship. I was using a nude at the time to reflect Jamaicans. So this speaks about Jamaican flag and how some Jamaicans related to the United States of America. And you must understand Jamaica is very divided in that. There are some people who absolutely love, idolize, and worship the United States and want to escape here every minute of the day. And there's the opposite people who find some level of exploitation in terms of the relationship between the two countries. This is another religious piece. This one is called The Head of John the Baptist. And people who are familiar with the Bible recognize Salome was a biblical character, and one of the things she asked for was the head of John the Baptist. I don't remember if she wanted to sleep with the king or the king wanted something from her, and she said, she was a dancer, right? A belly dancer, and she said, okay, if I'm going to do that, I need the head of John the Baptist. So believe me, I do know my Bible. Next. So that shows that I don't only take on Jamaica and the United States. This is about slavery when sugar was king. These 2 statues are done by a very well-known artist in Jamaica, and I re-photographed them, asked her permission if I can use them in an image. And now this image stands in her workroom, and then I put in the Westminster, the British Parliament, the British flag, and this is how we had slavery back in those days. Not only in the United States of America, but it was in the islands as well. Sometimes people make the mistake of thinking that slavery was only contained to the United States. No, and there was very harsh treatment in Jamaica as well. Beatings, beheadings, killings, torture, everything went as well. But this is about two people that in the midst of that, they are finding each other. Back to modern times. This came out of the Iraq war, the invasion of Iraq, when the question was, why did we invade Iraq? And my belief was that it was all about oil. And this shows that type of relationship of first world countries, not just the United States now, because this girl is, this is a Marks and Spencer bag, right? But the relationship between oil and other countries. So what we have here is my way of saying that native lands, foreign lands, how oil companies are just popping up as if they are growing, sprouting like trees out of the ground. And how, if you see up there, all the indigenous peoples are run off the land so that the oils can be exploited. And then the people in the first world, they don't really care where it comes from, as long as it's there. And that speaks to a lot of things that we consume. We don't really care about the history. We don't care about the fact that 8-year-old children are working 12, 15 hours a day for less than 30 cents an hour or less to produce the shoes that we wear, which, by the way, we buy those shoes for $150, $160. And guess what? When they leave the factory, they cost less than $4, right? And so this represented that. So, and then we have this animal, the blue rhino, who in his moving around, he's wandering around and he's just coming back and say, but this thing wasn't here yesterday, because the oil companies just sprout up so fast, right in front of them. This is an immigration piece which speaks to a number of things. This is the first world countries that we in the third world, so-called third world, just want to go for a variety of different reasons. But there is more ambiguity here. If you look in the water, you see guns. Now the question is, sometimes you hear people talk about how all these people who are coming to America is just bringing violence. But really it's a two-way street. It is a two-way street. Yes, people come up here, they can't find things the way they thought it was going to be. They turn to drugs, they turn to guns, they turn to violence. But then the United States takes a guy who came into the United States when he was 4 months old, right? His family brought him. Everything he knows is about the United States. But when he was 18 or 22 or so, he's found guilty of a crime. The only thing I know is drugs and guns. Guess where they send him back to? Jamaica. So no, it's a re-export of guns. Also, we do have a gun problem in many of the islands, and Jamaica is one of the main ones. Where does our guns come from? Take a guess. Exactly. So this shows that ambiguity there. And also, people talk about immigration right now. Do you know who was the first immigrants to Jamaica, to the United States? These guys on this ship, right? We were immigrants too, right? We didn't really want to come here, but we ended up here. And the other thing about this is families. The whole immigration thing sometimes break up families. These people are drowning. You'll see some of them. This guy, for example, is help. He's sinking. He's going under. So you have different people at different stages, and sometimes that includes families who are very pulled apart by the whole migration issues. This is a prophetic piece. This piece was completed in late 2007. And it's called How Long Can You Tread the Water? And it speaks about how, as I saw it at that time, how we were being led by headless men into a position that we eventually ended up in 2008, 2009. You could see through the mortgage situation. I saw it because all of a sudden I started to see my niece just came out of school, bought an apartment, low down payment, everything. And in about 9 months, she lost that apartment. So you could see where it was heading. I did not know it would have been as severe as it ended up, but this was done about a year before the crash in September 2008. Right? So in that sense, it's prophetic. And so basically what it is, you have these headless men, we can call them Wall Street bankers and politicians. We have all the corporations sinking into water, and then you have the old systems here that we eventually might have to revert to. Right? Old monies, old way of changing things, bartering, etc. Because this was not the last collapse of the financial system.
How about the dove in the hand on the last piece?
The dove, it always speaks about some form of peace and some sort of returning to nature and returning to a peaceful state, right? And so this is why it's on this side, not on that side. The headless men are on that side. The flamingos are on this side. These are what you might regard as old symbols. The very old symbols that you might find on some old Mayan or Inca thing. And that's an old Celtic symbol over that side. So basically, this is what it really looks at. I do all that. You see a lot of birds and animals, butterflies. I went through a butterfly period. Everything had butterflies. Huh? This was after Wall Street crash. And this was very interesting because I took that picture here. And of course, it's somebody whose life is put all in a shopping cart. But the interesting thing about this, I was in London when I saw this. Now, my daughter is involved in styling in New York. And most of the stylists and the fashion industry was wiped out by 2009. The whole financial collapse affected many people at different levels of society, even to the point of where the mannequins were left without clothes. Again, I'm not explaining all the bits and pieces, but you see, I have a whole lot of imagery and subtleness. This is the encroaching wilderness, which begs the question, which is the encroaching wilderness? Is this the wilderness, or is that the wilderness? One of the very interesting things I found about birds, and many people in Oakland Park area, and probably up here will recognize, this is the birds on the power lines. Do you know that those birds are eating McDonald's hamburgers? Can you understand what happens when a bird eats hamburgers with steroids? Remember Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds? Oh, be very afraid. This is an immigration piece, and this came out of a series I was working at. What I wanted to do with these pieces was to use an image on the wall, a well-known image on the wall, and tie it into the picture on that side of the frame. So in this case, it is speaking to the wedge foot, dry foot policy here, where people coming over from Haiti and Jamaica and stuff are turned back. No questions, nothing, go right back. While Cubans have a free run. It's a hypocritical policy. It's really a hypocritical policy. So this speaks about that. So we say all the Caribbean people, and those are the people who are turned back. Give me your Europeans, your Semites, your gays, your huddled Asians yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of Cuban and South American shores. Send home the Asians, the Caribbeans, and the Central Americans. From them I hide my light beneath a golden door. And if you look at it, that's really basically a lot of what is happening. There is a division policy about who comes and who stays. And the Cubans have a certain amount of priority. I wanted to make this into a series, it just never worked, but this is one. This is about fast food, all right? The fast food industry And how, oh, anybody recognize that image over there? Right. Okay. Right. So I appropriated it and reinserted McDonald's instead. And if you look at it in the wider picture, fast food companies are part of the colonizing processes because our food goes to the countries and a lot of people start to love the food, etc. But basically, McDonald's is not good. Not very good. And so there's this young youth, he's looking at both images and he's looking at his parents. And so if his parents and the people that he sees are getting larger than previous American life, you know which direction he's heading. And it's all poison. Anybody recognize that picture? Okay. It's by a photo called Eddie Adams, and it was taken during the Vietnam War. And it was about this South Vietnam colonel or general who shot this Viet Cong guy right in front of the camera. And he caught it immediately. Now I appropriated that image, substituted myself, because the name of this piece is Black on Black Violence is Self-Genocide. So this speaks to the black community. We hear all the time about Chicago, etc. How many black people are being killed by black people in Chicago. This is part of that type of thing. Yes, that is true. And there are other images inside there, the bling and the gun and the stuff. And so this is essentially basically what this image is about. Black on black violence is self-genocide. This is a quiz. Spot the terrorists. And the reason I have this here is because we tend to speak about terrorism in very narrow terms. When you look on TV, it's either the Muslim or the bald-headed white guy or a certain type, right? No, terrorism is a matter of perspective. To the Palestinian, the Israeli tank is the terrorist. To the other side, the guy with the bomb strapped to his body, that's a terrorist. So basically, who is a terrorist here? And we can pick any one of those people because they're all guilty of it. And to some extent, many of us are guilty of supporting it because we support the stereotypes of who is a terrorist. I think the British had an ad one day, clever ad, where you see a guy almost looking like a skinhead, wearing a bandana, muscular, he's running. And then you see this white woman walking, and the guy is running, and they're intercutting the two, right? And you can see the tension coming, and the focus was, he's going to snatch her bag. He's going to snatch her bag. And the guy is coming closer. And then as he reaches her, he taps her on the shoulder and says, you drop this, and walked away. And we are all guilty of that. We're all guilty of misrepresenting people and think that the enemy is the guy who is not really the enemy. This is very interesting because I found this flyer, leaflet, just outside of the main office where we had the show in Fort Lauderdale. And I can't read it now, but basically it was a call to arms. Right? And if you had it, I couldn't take it off because it was pasted, and in an attempt to take it off, it would rip, and the sun had kind of washed it out, so I couldn't really get a good representation. But when you started to read it, it started out quite sane. We must be careful of the government and the people who want to take over. And then it turned into a rant. I mean, in this thing, it turned out, and then like the guy was just going off. Till by the end, he was shouting and ranting and curse words and threatening to kill people. So I photographed it, and as this is unattributed poster found on the wall near Fort Lauderdale government main office. And this was about 2009, 2010. This is also deep in the economic crisis and when you had the whole of Tea Party marching and stuff and the whole right-wing militia type of situation. I know personally it's not a black person who wrote this because something inside there spoke about immigrants coming in to take over the country or whatever it is. Next. Okay, this is part of my series. It's called a wide series. And why it's called a wide series, because what I was doing was fading out most of the main imagery into white, except for the splash of blood. And this is called for colors only. And I guess people can understand the relationship between the noose and that. Next. In his name. Again, are you seeing the religious imagery, or do I have to point it out? Okay. And basically it speaks to how things are done in the name of religion. Who gave you the right? Another ambiguous piece. Anybody see it? Okay. There's a swastika inside there. I like that. Oh! Huh? Huh? And who gave you the right is also ambiguous, because it can speak to any number of things. Who gave the Nazis the right to exterminate, commit genocide on the Jews? Who gave the Nazis the right to appropriate a peaceful, long-time symbol and appropriate it for what they done? And now, who gave the Jews and others the right to take that symbol, which has been a sign of good for centuries, and say nobody can use it because it represents the Nazis? That symbol is an ancient Hindu and Buddhist and African symbol. So why is it not all of a sudden nobody in the world can use it because it is associated with Adolf Hitler, because he corrupted it? So that's why I speak about ambiguity, because a lot of my work has that sort of connotation about it. This is one of my, I would say, almost failed series. When I started this series, I had so many ideas I couldn't write them down fast enough. And I only managed to produce 4, and I just hit the wall. This is my Goddesses series. And what I was trying to do is to use the nude to represent various deities in an African style. And this had to do with either the air or birds. I think this had to do with birds. I'm not showing all of them, but I just wanted to make the point. Sometimes I want to work in series, and bam, I just hit a wall. I don't know if people have that problem. You start to work on something because it promises so much, and then bam, you can't go anymore in it. Next. This is to illustrate a totally different thing now. Not every one of my image has a purpose. Sometimes it's just purely visual. And if I can say something here, people might recognize by now, I hope, that I don't forego beauty. Beauty is part of my work. All right? I was reading a book that Caroline lent me, and they're speaking about conceptual art. And they're speaking about creating bland images. I'm saying, why would you want to create bland images? Who would want to photograph or paint bland images? And I do understand that that is there. But it sort of made me wonder about the purpose of that. I don't forego beauty. This is an image that had no activist motive in it. I just saw this image and I just kept building on it. And that happens from time to time. I'm sure no matter what we are as artists, sometimes we just want to paint something for the just pure visual beauty of it. Next. This is part of my Small Wonders series, which is only slightly activist. Meaning it remains, all of my work is coming from the same branch, no matter what I do. If it is beautiful or activist, it is coming from me. So they're all interconnected. With this series, what I'm just trying to do, it's what I want to call my earning series. Meaning, I know activist work, and any activist art would tell the truth. It's very difficult, probably the most difficult of all, well, probably not the most, but it is probably very difficult for people to buy it. Because activist work only goes around in particular cycles, right? And we're not in a very activist mood now in the world, at least in the United States. In other parts of the world, yes, but not in this part of the world. So every artist, no matter what they do, it's a struggle. Many artists have a second job. Some people want to be full-time, but if you want to paint, you have to sell. And I have no problem with people creating a different body of work that is aimed mainly to sell. Now, that's not selling out. Selling out to me might be when you create a piece of work and somebody says, oh, it's a pity the sky wasn't red because I have a red couch, and then you go back and paint the red couch. That might be selling out. But if you created the work of pure beauty and sell it as it is, I don't regard it as selling out. In fact, I don't really regard the others as selling out because each person has to do what they wish. But I think sometimes you can dilute your work when somebody tells you, why don't you paint only in red? Which is something I need to say to aside, because it's a teeny bit of a rant. One of the things I've always fought against is a gallery system. People make the mistake and think that gallery representation is good. Not really. The galleries are inside there for their own purpose and survival, not yours. Not you. If they can ride you and make $1 million, great. They're not showing your work because they think your work is good. They're showing your work because they think that your work is saleable. And sometimes some guy is going to come to show the place and says, I would have liked that if they had more red. I know a gallery person is going to come to you and say, put in more red. All right? So part of that rant is simply to state that we have to be very careful about our relationship with art and our relationship with other people, relationship with collectors and with museums and buyers. Right now, we're in a situation where a lot of people are controlling artists and changing artists and then disposing of artists. It's because art has become too much of a commodity. And we have to be careful. I think most of us inside here are artists want to be true to our art and our heart. In our art, same thing. And sometimes it becomes difficult. But guess what? That's who we are. So sometimes I think to get out of that thing is to create a body of work that are saleable. So you don't really compromise your real work. But you have to still decide whether or not that is worth it or not. Some people tell you never ever do that. One type of work forever. Personally, I can't do that. In the middle of the night, I'll get up and an image will come to me, I'll write it down. I have no control over that. I cannot get up and say, does that fit my body of work? Nah, and throw it away. So this is just part of those series, but they still have some level of activism in them. This was done out of the Tate Gallery. Anybody who goes to London must go to the Tate Gallery. Really, 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 really good work. And I was also lucky to see Weiwei's installation there. And I was also lucky to see that Spider Woman type of thing, big birch. Bourgeois, I saw that there. I mean, if you go to London, you cannot miss the Tate. There are a lot of other people, Saatchi and stuff, but the Tate is a must-go. You have to visit the Tate. This was taken outside the Tate Gallery. This goes back to the birds. And those young enough to remember Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds will feel chills. What is it? Migration of Butterflies? I can't remember the name of this. I should have. But then again, you see blood on it. Oh, I have blood over much of my work. Secret Dreams of Leaves. Don't ask me how I came up with that name, but that was it. This was a leaf I found that had gone, all the main body of it had just fallen out. Many of us are compelled to work with the perfect flower, plant, tree, etc. I love to work with the imperfect, those that have gone beyond repair, those that have little nicks and nooks and faded thing. I like to work with that because that represents who we are. None of us has reached a level of perfection. Not even me. So this basically was a very old flower that I photographed, and then I went back into Photoshop and I splashed color over it to give it some more vibrancy. And that basically speaks to the spiritual vibrancy of people, right? Something that is internal and that comes out, that age won't change. This is back to my old thing. This is from 1990. And it speaks to regeneration. It goes back to the same thing I said, from out of the industrial situation, the earth will retake itself. And I think that is the last slide. But if you give me 1 minute, I just want to show you one thing. It's less than 2 minutes, a slideshow. And there's a reason for it. I'm not even going to comment on that one.
Days and nights living out of my suitcase. I don't know where I'll sleep tonight. I'm not alone. I got my hopes and dreams. I do not know what will tomorrow hold. Face another day unknown. Pack it away into my suitcase. Well, it's big and yellow, and it's kinda square. It's getting kinda heavy. I've been carrying it all day. And do you mind if I rest here a while? Catch my breath. Look out across the evening sky. Nighttime's approaching. What will tomorrow hold? No, I face another day unknown. I pack it away into my suitcase. Yeah, into my suitcase. Days and nights living out of my suitcase.
That series, homelessness, I've never been homeless. I've perhaps known people who are homeless. But one of the things that I say people need is food, shelter, and clothing. If you take away shelter, you're taking away a lot. Because to some extent, you're also taking away much of the clothing and a lot of the food as well. There's another part to homelessness that I hoped I brought out here. Homeless veterans. Now, this series started, and Eric can tell you, long before homeless veterans became such a big issue. Everybody is now hiring veterans and jumping on the... In fact, I even saw a homeless guy. For years, I've been seeing him down Broward Boulevard begging, please help, homeless. Now, all of a sudden, I see him, homeless veteran, please help. Really? I doubt if he's a veteran, but he's jumping on the bandwagon as well. What hurts me is how people react to the homeless. When they approach a car, the windows go up, or the cell phone suddenly becomes activated, or you're looking for something right here, or You drive up the car, you go 15 feet behind the next car, and the guy comes, you just drive past him up with your face. And I'm thinking that these are people, no matter what has happened to them, they gave duty for this country in things that many of us would never do. Some might have not been shot at, they might have just been driven trucks in the back lane, but some have been shot. 22 veterans commit suicide every day. The majority of those veterans are over 50 years old. They are veterans of the Vietnam War. 22 that's almost, that's uncounted, that's 8,000 a year. I think it's something like 8,000 a year. Everybody treats them badly. They go to jobs, we thank you for your service, but we feel they are going to go whacked out and kill everybody in the office. Goodbye. The government treats them badly. The Congress treats them badly. Not voting money for them. The public treats them badly. We had a show early this year, a group show at the Lofts, and I had 3 of these images up. And on the opening night, people looked at the images and walked on. So for the closing night, I decided to do something a little different. I got a shopping cart, and I dressed up in a trench coat, put loads in the shopping cart, and I got a knapsack, and I sat below the pictures. Before I came to that position, people were going up to the pictures, the images on the wall. When I sat there, people walked 10 feet away. Now, this was in a building. Nobody even thought to say, why would they, at the closing of an exhibition, have a homeless man inside the building? They just automatically, instinctively avoided. When I peeked beneath the brim of my cap, I could see people 10 feet away. And they walked. Even people that I knew, who knew me well, because I was hunched over. But if they had glanced at me for more than a second, they'd say, oh, that's the way. But because they are so intent on not making eye contact with a homeless person, they kept their head and walked 10 feet away. And to me, that is despicable. This is something we need to deal with. Those who are artists here can lend a hand in one way or the other. The only thing I must say about that is it's a crime if I don't do something with those images. I need help to do something with those images. I know what I want to do, but I either don't have the motivation or the contacts to do it. But I need to do something with those images. So anybody who wants to work with me, who knows, we can think out something. That's the end of my presentation. Of all things I have said, I hope that last set of images resonate with you all. And you don't have to give money to the homeless, that's your decision. Just remember that person is a man, and that person might have given his service for you. And then we start to look at these people as different. They're not worthless. They're just circumstances. Circumstances many of us could have faced, if we just went one step to the left instead of one step to the right. And that's what I want as an artist. If one person leaves here even thinking about anything they have seen on the screen and saying, you know what, I'll change my attitude to that, that's fine with me. That's my victory. I don't need much more. Thank you very much.